The dawn breaks not with the gentle chirping of songbirds, but with a guttural, resonant grunt that vibrates through the damp soil of the Oligocene floodplain. It is 30 million years ago in what will one day be the Dakota Badlands, but now it is a lush subtropical gallery forest, thick with the scent of wet decay and flowering scrub. A mist clings to the water's edge where a herd of early three-toed horses, nervous and skittish, lowers their heads to drink. Suddenly, the silence shatters. The brush explodes outward, not parted by wind, but pulverized by a monstrous force. Out of the gloom steps a nightmare of calcium and muscle, a beast standing 6 feet at the shoulder. Its massive head adorned with bizarre, bony flanges that jut like polished warhammers. It is Archaeotherium, the Hell Pig, a creature that seems designed by a committee of demons. The horses scatter in a frantic spray of mud, but the beast does not pursue. It turns its gaze, cold and intelligent, toward a fresh carcass near the riverbank. This is the monarch of the wastes, a scavenger king whose very silhouette commands absolute terror. In this brutal theater of the prehistoric world, he is not merely an animal. He is an inevitability. To understand the biography of the Entelodont, one must first understand the stage upon which it was thrust. The world of the late Eocene and early Oligocene was a planet in flux, a dramatic theater undergoing a scene change of catastrophic proportions. The Grande Coupure, or the Great Break, had severed the warm, tropical continuity of the previous epoch. The global thermostat had been turned down. The lush, steamy jungles that once carpeted the northern latitudes were retreating, replaced by open woodlands and the very first stirrings of the savannas. It was into this hardening world that the ancestors of the Entelodonts emerged. They were not pigs, despite the colloquial moniker that would haunt their legacy. They were artiodactyls, even-toed ungulates, cousins to the ancestors of hippopotami and, strangely enough, whales. While their cetacean kin took to the oceans, the proto-Entelodonts looked at the drying, cooling land and chose a different path. Brutal domination. The early Eocene ancestors were modest creatures, generalists scurrying in the undergrowth of Asia. But as the land bridges formed and the continents drifted into their modern alignments, these creatures migrated into North America and Europe. They entered a political vacuum of the natural world. The great dinosaurs were long gone, and the early mammalian experiments in gigantism, the lumbering brontothers, and the bizarre Euntotheres were beginning to fade or had already vanished. The ecosystem demanded a new kind of survivor. The plants were becoming tougher, more abrasive. The prey was becoming faster. The Entelodonts evolved not just to survive this new order, but to crush it. They developed a physiology that was a stark departure from the graceful herbivores of the time. They became the tanks of the Oligocene, built to endure a world that was becoming increasingly hostile. Their emergence marked a shift from the hiding strategies of the forest floor to the stand-and-fight philosophy of the open. Scrubbed out as the Entelodonts ascended to power, evolution granted them a terrifying toolkit. Consider Archaeotherium and its later, even more monstrous relative, Daeodon. Their ascent was driven by an anatomical arms race that favored brute strength and intimidation. They were not agile hunters like the sleek cats that would come later. They were opportunistic bullies. Their legs were long and slender, seemingly incongruous with their massive barrel chests. Yet this was a specific adaptation for the open plains. They could cover vast distances with a tireless loping gait, patrolling territories that spanned hundreds of square miles. But the true marvel of their ascent was the skull. Entelodon's skull was a masterpiece of biological engineering designed for violence. It was enormous, taking up a significant percentage of the animal's total body length. But it was the architecture of the skull that told the story of their struggle. The zygomatic arches, the cheekbones, flared out into massive bony bosses. These were not merely for display. They were shields. In the fierce intraspecific combat that defined their social hierarchy, Entelodonts would slam their heads together or bite each other's faces. The bony warts protected their eyes and jaws during these titanic shoving matches. The life of a hell pig was a constant war. They were omnivores in the truest, most terrifying sense. They ate roots, tubers, and vegetation, using their immense strength to dig up what others could not reach. But they also craved meat. They were the Terminators of their day, likely tracking other predators like the creedent hyaenodon or the saber-toothed, nimravids, and bullying them off their kills. Imagine the scene. A pack of hyaenodons has just brought down a primitive camel. They are tearing into the flesh, hungry and desperate. Then the ground trembles. The Archaeotherium arrives. It does not sneak. It announces itself. It opens a jaw that can expand to nearly 90 degrees, revealing a horrifying array of teeth tusk-like canines for piercing, and bone-crushing premolars that could pulverize, a femur as if it were a twig. The struggle for the entelodont was the struggle for calories in a calorie-starved world. They were high-maintenance machines. To fuel a body that weighed nearly a ton, in the case of the later Daeodon, they had to be constantly eating.
The brutal reality
This necessity
of their
drove
lives.
them to be aggressive, territorial, and utterly fearless. Fossil evidence shows entelodont bite marks on the skulls of other entelodonts, scars of a life lived in perpetual conflict. A testament to a society where only the absolute strongest could pass on their genes. The narrative of the hell pig reaches its crescendo in the early Miocene with the arrival of Daeodon shoshonensis. If Archaeotherium was a tank, Daeodon was a fortress on legs. Standing nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing as much as a bison. This was the ultimate expression of the entelodont blueprint, the moment of truth. For this species was its total dominance of the North American ecosystem. For a few million years, nothing walked the earth that could challenge a full-grown Daeodon. They were the lords of the agate fossil beds, the undisputed masters of the high plains. Their contribution to natural history was the perfection of the scavenger predator. Niche on a massive scale, a role that few mammals have successfully occupied. Since let us slow down and examine the machinery of their dominance. The climax of their evolution was the jaw. It is here that the entelodonts separated themselves from every other living thing. Their jaw muscles were so powerful that they attached to a high sagittal crest on the top of the skull, similar to a gorilla or a hyena, but scaled up to nightmarish proportions.
Skull structure.
When a Daeodon bit down, it didn't just tear flesh. It shattered structure. They could consume the entire animal meat, gristle, marrow, and bone. This ability to process the garbage of the ecosystem made them essential. They were the cleaners, the processors of the dead. In the vast open woodlands, a carcass did not rot. It was obliterated by the hell pigs. There's a fossilized cache in Nebraska that serves as a grim monument to this climax. It contains the remains of primitive camels, severed and crushed.
Look at this.
Among the
Daeodon
bones,
tooth fits
the bite
perfectly
marks
right here.
match the dentition of
That
the
explains
entelodonts
the trauma.
perfectly. This was their golden age, a time when their sheer audacity and physical power rendered them immune to the threats that plagued lesser beasts. They walked through the Miocene valleys with the heavy, arrogant stride of creatures who knew no fear. But as with all great dynasties, the fall was inevitable. The very forces that had forged the entelodonts eventually conspired to destroy them. The world continued to change. The climate cooled further, and the moisture that sustained the open woodlands began to vanish. The sea of grass was coming. The true prairies were spreading across North America. This environmental shift brought with it a new cast of characters. The herbivores became faster, evolving longer legs and more efficient digestion to cope with the abrasive silica in the grass. The horses, once small and slow, were becoming swift runners. The entelodonts, with their massive bulk and reliance on brute force, began to find themselves outpaced. Simultaneously. A new threat emerged from the shadows, the amphixionids, or bear dogs. These were predators that combined the strength of a bear with the speed and agility of a wolf. Unlike the solitary hell pigs, who likely roamed alone or in loose family groups, the bear dogs were pack hunters. They were smarter, faster, and more adaptable. The twilight years of the Entelodonts were likely a time of starvation and frustration. The slow, lumbering prey they had relied upon was disappearing. The carcasses they used to steal were now guarded by packs of agile predators that could harass and injure the giant pigs until they retreated. The hell pig, once the bully of the plains, became a relic, a dinosaurian mammal in a world moving toward modernity, by the Middle Miocene. The great Daeodon had vanished. The lineage that had terrorized the northern hemisphere for nearly 20 million years was extinguished, leaving behind only their terrifying skulls as a warning to the future. The Entelodonts left no direct descendants. When the last Daeodon exhaled its final breath, a unique biological experiment came to a close. They were a singular occurrence in the history of life, a convergence of traits that created a monster, in the truest sense of the word. They remind us that nature is not always graceful. It is capable of producing designs of brutal, uncompromising efficiency. Today, we look at the hippopotamus and the wild boar and see faint echoes of the hell pig, but nothing truly compares. The Entelodonts serve as a stark reminder of the transitory nature of power. For millions of years, they were the invincible kings of their domain, terrified by nothing, yielding to no one. Yet, even the mightiest fortifications of bone and muscle are no match for the slow, grinding wheel of time and climate. In the fossil halls of our museums, their grinning skulls stare back at us, a memento mori from the deep past, whispering that even the monsters eventually fade into the dust.